Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lloyd Albert. I head up Public and Government Affairs at AAA Northeast. Would like to welcome all of you today. Since this pandemic began, I'm really proud of the fact that our public affairs team have pivoted very quickly back in March, and we've been doing outreach in new and different ways. And one of those ways is getting on webinars and talking about a whole host of issues. Traffic safety related issues. We've had a lot of webinars related to automotive topics. And today our topic is cycling in Rhode Island. I don't know about the rest of you, but I see a phenomena out here. I cannot look out my window on any given day and not see bicyclists going by. It is a refreshing circumstance in my mind. The only thing that frustrates me is how many of them don't wear helmets. So I go around the neighborhood telling people you should really wear a helmet, and some of my neighbors take that graciously and others not so much. But I try to lead by example anyway, and you're going to be hearing from one of our staff people, Diana, today, who will talk about the safety aspects. But there's so much more to this cycling phenomenon than safety. There are policy issues. There are great opportunities to expand cycling in the state, a benefit to the environment, to good health, and other things you'll be hearing about today. So we are very fortunate to have four really dedicated and passionate folks talking about the issue today. One of them is Liza Burkin with the Providence Streets Coalition. We have Bari Freeman here from Bike Newport, CJ Operthauser with Grow Smart Rhode Island, and our AAA's very own Diana Amondi Gugliotta. So before we get started, quick housekeeping, a note that you are all on mute. Your cameras are off, except for the participants here, the panelists. But you do have an opportunity to weigh in this afternoon by asking a question using the chat feature. So feel free to do that as the presentations are delivered. And then we'll have, I think, enough time after the presentations are completed to have a healthy and robust Q&A. So again, we have an hour or so at our disposal here. We will make the best of it. And to get us started today is Liza Burkin. Liza is the organizer of the Providence Streets Coalition. She's an urban planner, a mobility advocate, a writer, and adventure cyclist. Liza is also on the organizing team for Providence Bike Jam, a social group ride mobile dance party that happens on the last Friday evening of every month. And I have not been included in that party to date, but I got to talk to Liza about that after the fact. And of course, all of that happens during the non-pandemic times, of course. But Liza has really demonstrated some leadership on the biking issue here in Rhode Island. I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to share with us today. So Liza, let me turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much for having me today, Lloyd. It's really nice to be talking about bikes. I always love talking about bikes, and I miss Providence Bike Jam more than anything else in this pandemic. Riding with friends, riding solo, it's just not the same. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. As I said, I'm Liza with the Providence Streets Coalition, which is a group that was recently launched in December of 2019. Next slide. So why I come from the biking world. I actually used to work at Bike Newport, and the Providence Streets Coalition is supported by the national group People for Bikes, but it's about so much more than bikes, because as we've seen throughout the country, that a lot of changes really happen really effectively when we think about streets as a whole, not just as the different user groups who are on them. And when we build coalitions that are broad and deep, and bring a lot of people together to advocate for each other's causes. So streets are connected, obviously, by all the different people who are using them. Next slide. But more importantly, the streets are connected to so many different causes, whether that is the climate crisis, public safety, food access, or in racial and environmental justice. And I leave the question marks up because because there are so many more things out there that our streets and public spaces are connected to. Next slide. So all around the country, we've been seeing coalitions forming around streets, combining different user groups, different transit advocates, bike advocates, pedestrian advocates, and wider groups that work on housing issues, that work on youth empowerment, that you work on lots of different things and are forming together. And so here in Providence, we decided to do the same thing. So next slide. So we launched in December of 2019, bringing together about 25 different partners and about 35 different supporters. And you can see all of the amazing organizations that are part of this coalition at pvdstreets.org. And really the goal of the timing and the goal of the coalition was to bring these 4 different government plans off of the shelf and into the streets. So here you have the City of Providence's Great Streets Plan, which is really the main focus of the coalition right now, because it's because of just the timing of the actionable construction that is about to happen. The state's transit plan, which is essentially completed but has not yet been formally adopted, as well as the state bike mobility plan, same thing, essentially complete and ready to go. We just need adoption. And the City of Providence's climate justice plan, which was released last October. So all of these plans these documents are brand new or about to be released. And we need the people power to actually see them implemented in a short time frame, because there's no time to lose. You know, we have people getting hit in the streets every day. There's a strong sense of immediate urgency around street safety, as well as the chronic, more long-term effects of climate change and asthma rates, you know, which are primarily caused by tailpipe emissions. So all of these different things need to happen now. So next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Great Streets Plan, which is our primary focus right now. It is, the city has imagined a 75-mile network of high comfort urban trails for people of all ages and abilities. And what I mean by that is you'll see this painted bike lane where the guy is getting doored. That is not a bikeway. that is you know, designing a city for people who are already biking, not for those who we hope to attract, which includes people from ages 8 years old to 80 years old. And so we're talking about facilities here that if you're not going to let your grandchild or your grandparent on them, they have no business being in the public space. We have to stop designing cities for people who are 30 and athletic, like myself. It's not for me. It'll be great for me, but it's not for me. So so the city has is on this plan and has been doing construction in many different neighborhoods. Many different projects are set to go. And if anybody wants to get specific about what projects are coming up next, let me know. Next slide. So how are we going to actually make these changes? It's really, really important, and I'm so grateful to AAA for the opportunity to communicate with a driving audience that cyclists and mobility advocates make the case to people who primarily drive now about the benefits. What do they get out of it? We know that we're getting safe bike facilities and safer sidewalks and safer and better bus stops out of these changes, but what do the drivers get? So this is one of my favorite comics. Bikey Face is her name, out of Boston, and she put together this image that really communicates the failures of the phrase "share the road," where the cyclist thinks that sharing the road means that the cyclist gets to ride right in front of the car, and the car has to slow down and just be patient. And then the car thinks, the person driving the car thinks that sharing the road means the cyclist moving all the way over and the driver passing the cyclist. And just for anyone who rides bikes knows that all too frequently drivers are passing cyclists much too closely with just a couple of inches instead of the 3 feet that we really need to be safe. So share the road is too vague. It doesn't really say how to share the road. It doesn't, and it's been around for decades and hasn't really gotten us to where we need to be. So the coalition has put together a new messaging campaign. Next slide. That we think really conveys a better message to drivers, which is there's peace on the road when everyone gets a piece of the road. And so this is a photo of a driver seeing the cyclists, you know, with separated infrastructure. There's not going to be any conflicts here at this intersection because everybody has a space to be on the road. So right now we have, cities were built with sidewalks for people who are walking and travel lanes for people who are driving. And everybody in between, people who are cycling, people who are using e-scooters, skateboards, powered wheelchairs, those one-wheel things, and the little mobility devices of the future that haven't even been invented yet, but many people at Silicon Valley are working on right now as we speak. There's really no controls on our behavior. There's no controls on what we're doing. We don't have the same infrastructure that cars have. So we don't have lanes, we don't have signals, we don't have signs. And that has resulted in some animosity and some confusion. And when you're driving, it's scary. There's suddenly people, and because people don't know how to be, there's also no standardized education. So what we're asking is that what we really need, what's been proven to work all over the world, is separated infrastructure for people who are moving in between the pedestrian and the car speed, because we also certainly don't want pedestrians being vulnerable by having people on scooters and bikes taking over sidewalks. So next slide. So this is our campaign. More safety, less confusion is the tagline, and it shows the two-way separated urban trails that the city of Providence is going to be constructing all over the city. And we think that it really communicates the benefits to drivers of making a more peaceful and less chaotic driving experience in cities these days, with so many more people traveling outside of cars. There just needs to be more, a dedicated space for people to be. So this campaign is on 5 billboards so far. It'll be running for about 18 months, and it's on billboards throughout town. It's on the RIPTA buses. It's on Spotify, Hulu, digital ads, the radio stations. It's fully bilingual, and it's reaching about 10 to 20,000 people per day at the moment, and bringing a lot of people to our website to learn more about why this infrastructure is necessary, and allowing us to speak directly to folks when projects are coming to their neighborhoods, so we can let them know well in advance and go above and beyond what the city has the capability to communicate to people about these really exciting and positive changes. So I'll play you the social media video, and then let my other panelists take it away.
Greetings, humans. Alien Commander Glort here from Big Nazo Lab. Join me in supporting the new urban trails that help make our city more connected and easier to navigate, even for non-humans. Support safer streets for all at pvdstreets.org.
With Big Nazo, which is a local theater troupe, to create these silly videos. And you'll see that in the beginning of the video, the cyclist is riding right alongside the car. Then the urban trail appears, and the cyclist is able to move over to the side. So the driver has the clear right of way to keep going without any confusion about where that cyclist is going to be. So pvdstreets.org, if you're interested to learn more, would love to have you along for the ride. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Liza. That's a great synopsis of the initiative that you've really spearheaded here in the state. I do have to say, I was driving into my neighborhood in Bonnet Shores last night. I saw a new sign on the causeway, a yellow sign, and had a picture of a bike and a car, and it said share the road. And the first two people I thought of were you, Liza, and Bari, both of whom have made an impact on me and helped me to dispossess me of my notion that sharing that road message is the panacea that we hoped it would be. So I think what you're talking about is something diametrically different, and we'll have some questions at the Q&A about how might we pay for those kind of initiatives going forward, and I'm sure you have some good answers for that. Speaking of Bari Freeman, what started for her as a personal effort to stay out of her car during Newport's busy season became a full-time effort to help Newport become the bicycle-friendly community it is destined to be. Bari founded Bike Newport in 2012 after more than 25 years of experience in the nonprofit sector for organizations such as Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, Oxfam, and Americas for Fairness in Lending. Wherever she works, her focus is on building collaborations, optimizing resources, and engaging communities. Now it's all about creating conditions that help more people to ride bicycles more often and ensuring that biking is treated as a primary choice for transportation as well as recreation. And I happen to serve with Bari on the Statewide Planning Commission's Transportation Advisory Committee, and I can attest to the fact that she is extraordinarily passionate on the policy issues leading to safe biking and a proliferation of biking in the state. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Bari. Welcome.
Thank you, Lloyd. So Bike Newport is an advocacy organization. We work to make biking better so that everyone who wants to ride a bicycle has what they need to do that, the knowledge, the confidence, and the acceptance that they are a primary road user. So thank you, Liza, for setting us all up to have a conversation about what it means to be on the road together. A key word in all of this is everyone. It's everyone regardless of the style of riding, the experience of riding, language, mobility. As advocates, we have to make sure that we're representing and speaking to everyone. That's something that Bike Newport takes very seriously. Liza mentioned that the PVD Streets is bilingual. Everything that Bike Newport does is bilingual. There's a lot of outreach to Spanish first, transportation, cyclists, statewide, families, individuals. Again, mobility is a big part of the discussion. So we really want to think about this as everyone. And I'll refer to that a few times because what we don't want is to speak only to confident cyclists. We want to be sure that we're speaking to cyclists who are concerned as well. We don't want to just speak to the fearless. We want to speak to those who say no way, no how, but maybe really do want to get on a bike. It's just that there's not a place where they feel comfortable or unafraid because we put bicycles in the road with cars. And we are moving away from that. We're at a point where we have to think about paint as an immediate solution, but it's short term. While we as a state and as a society start to understand the need to separate bicycles from cars, as is done in any city or country where more people bicycle, they are separated from cars. So it's going to be a recurring theme today. Next slide. Diana was wonderful. She posed a few questions to us, and I'm going to take a stab at answering, I think, 4 of them. The first one is, what has changed due to COVID-19? Is it true that biking is more popular than ever? In fact, it's very true. Short answer is yes, there's an explosion. It's local, it's national, it's international. If you open up the paper, you see references and headlines to the explosion, to the waits, to the fact that there are no bikes to be had. At Bike Newport, we have given out 200 bicycles since March. Those are bicycles that come from people's basements and from recycling days that we're able to restore and distribute. Before COVID, people would come and choose a bike and work on it themselves. Now, during COVID, we can't do that because of the proximity of working close to people with the tools and the parts. Now we restore the bikes and we distribute them into the community. We're also repairing bikes, which we never did before. We always had people come in and repair their own bikes with guidance. Now we're helping out the bike shops that can't keep up with the demands for repairs. You'll see statistics like 85% perceive biking. 85% of people perceive biking as safer than transit, as safer than public transportation during pandemic. That's one of the reasons we're seeing so many more people on bikes. Ridership on trails has doubled. And in some cities where transit is really primary, they're seeing 3 to 4 times the number of people using bike share or commuting to work as they used to. So short answer, yes. Way more people are riding bikes, and that's why you're seeing them outside your window too, Lloyd. Next slide. What are we doing about it? Well, Bike Newport approaches things always through 3 doors: advocacy, education, and building community or culture. In the advocacy area, we have been running surveys statewide through the Paths to Progress Coalition to talk to people to find out if they're riding more, where they're riding more, if they're seeing more people riding. So we're not just going with anecdotal information, we're actually quantifying. We've gotten 650 responses, which is a really great sampling to understand how biking is different and what people are experiencing themselves, or to Lloyd's point, what people are seeing. And when we first started to do this, we had the usual suspects. So if we asked people to identify what kind of a cyclist they were in this survey, in that category of fearless or confident or concerned or no way, no how, we had way more people. 80% of the people responding were from the confident crowd, because that's who we talked to. So as a community, we went out and started pushing this survey out through other than biking modes. So it went out through all kinds of community organizations so that we got to the point of flipping that and seeing only 20% of the folks out of that 650 are that fearless crowd. So we're talking to everybody and everything, again, in English and Spanish. So that's the advocacy part of this, is quantifying and qualifying what exactly is happening so we can help use that to identify what kind of infrastructure we need going forward. The education is great. Of all times for this to happen, we ran our first summer camp. We did run a summer camp during COVID. Kids had a great time. Education is important. The kids loved the summer camp, and we moved our adult education online. Since we can't meet with people and hold hands and hold tools together, we now have a whole array of videos and guidance online. And we even had phone numbers for our mechanics to FaceTime with people who are having trouble fixing their own bikes. So what do you do during COVID? You adapt, right? You adapt and you figure out ways to help people so that they can get on their bikes and the bikes can be in good condition. And how do you do that during COVID? You stop and you change the way you did it. You adjust to it. Community and culture is a really fun one. We just had a wonderful event last weekend, which was designed to be COVID compatible. We needed people to get out on bikes, and we needed to do some fundraising, frankly, for Bike Newport. And what we did was an event that was located in 10 locations around the city with 10 hosts, 10 restaurants, 10 musicians, and people got on their bikes and they rode to little events where only 10 people at a time could go in. And 100 people participated, and they were crying tears of joy because it was just so much fun, and it was COVID compatible. So this COVID compatible theme, there are solutions besides Zoom, and we need to think of them and think of ways to keep people active and socialized and supported in biking, because we need people to experience biking in a comfortable way so that they can, to one of your later questions, Diana, become advocates themselves, ambassadors themselves, to make sure that we address this. Next slide. Has the past 6 months changed our plans and our methods? Well, yes, planning. There are a lot of plans in progress. Liza mentioned them. In Newport, we have a North End development plan. Statewide, we have a bike mobility plan. We need to see these things through. So what's changed in terms of planning is focusing on these, making sure that everybody understands the low cost, high return of investing in bicycle and walking infrastructure, especially now at a time when we don't know what's happening with development. We can't really move development projects forward because so many things are changing due to COVID. One thing that's not changing is the need for people to get where they need to go safely. So while we're waiting for those things, we can really focus on seeing these things through. When we see the bike mobility plan through, which was completed in July 2019 and has yet to be approved and used, that book is filled with the methods that will be used to do these things. So let's use the bike mobility plan. Let's get it approved. Let's use it even when it's in draft form. It's great information in there. And for places like Newport with a North End development plan, focused, as you can see from the little arrows, very much on connectivity and biking and walking. All of those arrows on that upper picture in the upper left, those are all about north-south connections from the most densely populated part of Newport to the rest of the city. That's the kind of thinking that we need to do. Another method of how are we doing it is to market. Those little green squiggly lines are, Bike Newport out marking places where people can tip off the road on their bicycles because the paving was done poorly, with cars in mind, because cars don't tip off the road, but bikes do. And so we're doing things with the city to actually mark places where we can make improvements on the road. The family that we're looking at, we need to know that family. We need to know that family who wants to ride, and we have to make it possible for them to ride. So our methods are getting very personal, very granular, picking up the paint and doing it ourselves and going to the meetings and making sure that we elevate the projects that we can do sooner that we don't have to wait for changes to how we do things post-COVID. And let's get some of this easier, lower cost, higher return projects underway. Next slide. How do we inspire the community? We do it with our partners and ambassadors. AAA is probably the best example. We've worked on Rhode Island Waves. I hope that everybody is familiar with this campaign that says, before you step into the street or move into an intersection as a cyclist, stop and wave to that car. Do you see me? And wait for the car to say, yes, I see you. It's a two-part conversation. We've got it worked beautifully in Newport. Everybody's doing the wave. People don't enter into the street without ensuring that that car is not looking at its phone, without ensuring that that car sees them and tells them to go ahead. It happened, the campaign came to be because of people dying in broad daylight in our crosswalks in Newport, 4 of them. And it was so successful in Newport, it's gone statewide. Thank you to AAA for partnering on that, on shuttles to get people across the bridges with their bikes, on maps to make sure that people have the maps that show the suitable and most suitable road, on the surveys that we just talked about. People who drive cars and are members of AAA also ride bicycles, and they also walk. Very often they're the same people. And we need to all talk to people together. We need not to only be our own voice, we have to give our voice, the voice of advocacy out. Rip to Runs posters in the buses, police departments get out on the street and talk to people and talk to drivers about being aware of one another and being courteous. Cars that are courteous. Who would think a word like courteous would make such a difference? If you're courteous in your car, it means that you're not riding up on someone, that you're taking that extra few seconds just to let that person have some space. School districts, having events for people to experience what it's like to ride without fear of traffic. What you're looking at in the lower right is when Ocean Loop in Newport got closed to cars for all of 2 hours on one day. We can do that a lot more often, but look at those families riding, not worrying about cars. Parents out with their kids, zooming all over the place, not worrying about cars. Separated bike lanes do the same thing. We need to give people the opportunity to ride without that fear. I mentioned the talking to the 4 kinds of riders, the fearless, the concerned, the confident, and the no way, no how. Diana and Lloyd were kind enough to create a poll that we're going to put up so that you can identify yourself and help us know how you identify yourselves, and we will promise to use this information well. There are 2 questions. I think we missed the first one. Can you switch to the first one, or is it too late? That's okay, we can just use this one. How would you describe yourself as a rider, even if you're not riding now? Strong and fearless, you'll ride anywhere, including near cars. Enthused and confident, you're okay with cars, but you prefer bike lanes. Interested but concerned, you like riding, but you'd rather not be near cars. And no way, no how, you're generally not interested in biking.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. We can go to the next slide. Oh, look at that. Enthused and confident, 44%. Interested but concerned, 50%. The national number for that is 60% of all people consider themselves interested but concerned. They like riding, but they're concerned about being near cars. So we need to make sure that they're not near cars. Thank you. Question, what would we like to see in 2021 regarding transportation? 2 things. Number 1, we want to normalize that bikes, pedestrians, and cars are all primary in transportation planning. We have to stop planning for cars first and then adding bikes and cars. Regardless of whether the first words on this slide are, we're going to address pedestrians and bicyclists. We need to do it at that time, right from the start. We need to look at our roads holistically and consider where everybody's going to be before we put a mark on that plan, because they cannot be afterthoughts. And the old approach of doing cars first, it's old and it's dangerous, and we need to stop doing that. The second is connectivity. By the way, if you speak French, la rue pour tous is the road is for all, and you can see the bike wheels, car wheels, and sneakers. You can see the car and the bicycle not next to each other, but riding in the same lane. The second is connectivity. We have to help everyone get from A to B safely, biking and walking. And again, while we're waiting to make our development plans, now is the time to make that happen. You're looking at the bike mobility plan. You're looking at the map of Rhode Island and what it should look like when we have more bike paths in a network connecting all over the state. And you're looking on the lower right at a proposed program in Newport that did not happen, a Newport Bike Share Solutions. We need to have bike share everywhere. We need to have bike share everywhere and have it accessible to everyone so that anybody can grab a bike whenever they want to. And we need to make our infrastructure separated. Paint is fine. We need to put paint down right now. We need to mark the roads so that people know where to be and that there are always bicycles there on every road. But that's short term. The long term has got to be separated. And if you go to any country, anywhere, any city in America where people ride a lot, the bikes are separated from the cars. Next slide. We've reached the end. Please visit Bike Newport, bikenewportri.org. Contact us, participate, be part of the movement, and thank you.
Very good, Bari. Thanks so much. And it's really interesting to hear how your organization has kind of transitioned because of the pandemic, because of the coronavirus. And thank you for that perspective. And you're right. You called the bike shop this spring for your bike tune-up. Add 3 weeks to a normal, year is how long it took. And I needed a new helmet. And if you even went to a department, Walmart, for example, the bike department was cleaned out, which is really another example of how this pandemic has made people think about biking in a different way, in a good way. So that's terrific. So thank you for that, Bari. Up next, we have CJ Operthouser. He's the Director of Training and Placemaking at Grow Smart, Rhode Island, as well as the co-founder of Walk Providence, a volunteer-driven pedestrian advocacy group. He lives a personal vehicle-free life in the Fox Point neighborhood of Providence. And for a AAA guy to say that, CJ, it takes a lot for me to even mention that. But I got to tell you, I know CJ from his great work at Grow Smart. On any given day, he'll be all over the state talking to town planners, city planners, and doing a really great job for that organization. So welcome, CJ. Happy to hear your perspective today.
Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks for getting that line out about car-free living, even if it hurt you deep down. I really appreciate it. There we go. Yeah, so like Lloyd said, I'm kind of representing both Grow Smart Rhode Island and Walk PVD today. So next slide, please. So anyway, back in April, I don't know if you've heard of it, but this coronavirus thing sort of hit the world, and we immediately saw a lot of change. Everything shut down, and people had fewer places to go. People were staying home. So what that actually meant as far as road safety was nationwide, car trips were down because, again, people maybe were working from home or went to the grocery, less times in a month. But traffic fatalities actually shot up quite a bit. In some cities, it was as much as 50%. It really varies place to place. And car trips were down sometimes 300% or maybe 50% or something. And not 300% as if like negative, but a very, very fewer car trips. And so how does that happen? Well, it's because of the ways our streets were designed. Our streets, even our neighborhood streets, were designed typically pretty wide and pretty much for cars, with, like Bari was saying, with pedestrians and bicyclists and everyone else being sort of an afterthought. So what happens when you have less congestion on these streets is they start to look a lot like highways, and people start to treat them a lot like highways, and they go a lot faster, and they have less to look out for, at least in their minds, and collisions happen and deaths happen. And that's a major problem. That's kind of an awakening of how our streets were designed. If all it takes is fewer people driving for traffic fatalities to go up, something is wrong. So meanwhile, along with that, just to mention, transit ridership also kind of shot down. I think it's starting to bounce back. I'm not going to get into that too much right now because Scott Avedisian on the last AAA webinar did a great job kind of covering all that. So I'd encourage people to watch that recording. And the third thing that really started happening that hit my world even more is people started realizing pretty quickly that this 6-foot distancing thing can't happen on a typical sidewalk. Many sidewalks are maybe 5 or 6 feet. in Providence, we're lucky to have like downtown and on select streets, it's wider than that, so you can pass someone else at a safe distance on the sidewalk, but typically you'd have to get off the sidewalk and into the street just to pass someone safely. And so that became a major problem. Next slide, please. And so Providence was coming up with a solution to that exact problem. Providence rolled out what we call the Slow Streets program. The planning department did. And while I have to say, the rollout was meant to be fast and meant to address the problem quickly, because simultaneously the parks were closed in Providence. And I know a lot of parks are closed statewide as well. So that open space was gone. And a lot of people don't have yards. And either way, people want to get out and walk and get some exercise, or even be able to safely get to grab a quart of milk or whatever. So Providence came out with the Slow Streets program, and it was rushed kind of quickly, and so it didn't have a lot of community input. And it was meant to, as you can see in the map here, the dark spots are places with less, yard space per property. So they tried to, align it with those neighborhoods, those pockets of the city. And there was some pushback. Some people didn't like it. Some businesses didn't like it because, again, it was kind of rushed out. So I will say that, which is all fair. And it was a, a very malleable pilot program, so it was adjusted accordingly. But regardless, the Slow Streets accomplished what they meant to accomplish on their streets. So if you look on the right, the top right picture is on Governor Street in Providence, and you see that what the Slow Streets did was they limit the car traffic on those stretches to be local traffic only, meaning if you're stopping on a store, on that street to grab something or get some kind of service, you can of course use it. If you live on that street, obviously you can drive on it. If you're visiting someone on that street, go for it, but just not allowing through traffic, just not kind of passing by on your car. And if you are in your car, to go 15 miles an hour or slower. And what happened immediately with these barriers up and slower car traffic, or sometimes no car traffic, is a lot more people were in the street, social distancing, passing people on the sidewalk. Here you see a family on bicycles and a couple walking right in the middle of the street, but I have tons of pictures of people walking their dogs, walking with toddlers, strollers, wheelchairs, everything. People felt very comfortable simply because they felt like they had more ownership over the street than cars for once. It had its quirks. I mean, it was a volunteer kind of managed program. That's me on the bottom right, moving a barrier, back when it was still cold enough to wear a winter hat, apparently. But it started to resolve this issue of our sidewalks being historically underbuilt for pedestrians and streets being overbuilt for cars. Next slide, please. Another thing that happened here in Providence, and I think all around the world, in some cities as well, everyone's probably familiar walking around a city with having to push a little button to get the walk signal at the next green light. And the problem with that is, first and foremost, if you miss the green light and you hit the walk signal when it's already on, you have to wait for a couple cycles just to get the walk signal, which frankly sucks, right? It's inconvenient, it wastes time, and it's kind of confusing. And it also kind of lowers the pedestrian or anyone using that signal on the sort of totem pole of importance. But during COVID, another important part of that is just the high surface touch of those buttons. So the city pretty quickly in DPW made those signals automatic just to limit the number of people having to touch a surface over and over again. So they did it temporarily, they made it automatic. And even though this was a fight that's been pushed by other folks in the city for a while, as part of Walk PVD, we jumped on this opportunity to try to make it permanent because we just had a window of opportunity here. And we had a formal letter and some, a lot of Facebook push and some emails and things like this, basically saying, great, you made it automatic, just leave it that way, just don't turn it back, like less work for you. And amazingly, within a couple of days, the city agreed. So we kind of made lemonade out of lemons in that situation. But again, just sort of that change in giving value to the pedestrian experience because of COVID we're seeing. Next slide, please. So another just sort of COVID-related strategy here related to car space has to do more with our downtowns, our main streets, our small businesses, our business districts. And we all know how difficult it might be to operate a business when you can only have 1 or 2 people inside or 0 people inside at a time, especially restaurants. And so all over the country and all over the world, there's different strategies being taken to basically let those businesses spill out into the street and take up space outside. And often that means shutting down space built for cars. And on the left, you see 2 smaller photos, and those are from right in here in Providence. Westminster Street, a block of Westminster is closed off for pretty much the whole day every Saturday. I've gone to every single one so far, see if I can make it all the way through the fall with that record, but very, very successful, very popular. On the bottom left, you see Atwell's shuts down a few blocks twice a week on the evenings. And it's basically a huge outdoor, shared restaurant space between a ton of restaurants, obviously incredibly popular. And on the right, you'll see in Rockland, Maine, and actually a lot of small communities in Maine have shut down their entire main street to car traffic and diverted traffic so that small businesses can operate outside. And what's amazing about that to me is those are also state highways. So that complicates things quite a bit, but they're still able to do it. And they're trying to shift that value of street space over from cars to, actual people. Next slide, please. So my last thing that I want to cover is, complete streets. Probably a lot of people on this call have heard of complete streets, but basically it's a philosophy that, all of our streets should be built for all users, all modes, all abilities, no matter how old you are, no matter how you get around, car, wheelchair, pedestrian, bicycle, scooter, that you can get around and it's safe and it's comfortable and it's convenient for you. The real way to sustain this practice and make it not just a good idea is an ordinance. And that's a push that GrowSmart's been making for years now, and that's part of my job. That's probably what Lloyd was talking about, going all over the state. That's takes up a lot of, you got to meet a lot of people and go all over the place to try to make this happen. And so far, the one municipality in the state with a complete streets ordinance was Central Falls, and they actually passed New England's first green and complete streets ordinance, which the green there basically includes, green infrastructure like street trees and rain guards and things like that, which is fantastic. And so there's momentum elsewhere. There's momentum in Newport and a few other cities and towns that I've been working with to develop ordinance language, which is really great. I will say, Providence doesn't have a complete streets ordinance. Providence has some amazing plans and projects like the Great Streets Plan that Liza was talking about. But probably a complete streets ordinance would strengthen those plans and projects. That probably make them smoother to roll out. They would probably, they kind of safeguard them in a way. And they just established this philosophy in a legal way and not just in like a systematic way and not just in a, that's a good idea sort of a way. And if we had complete streets ordinances here in Providence and around the state, probably some of those methods that are kind of band-aiding the situation during COVID that I've covered wouldn't have had to been implemented now, or at least not to the same degree, because we've already would have had maybe sidewalks that were wide enough to accommodate social distancing and so on. So anyway, this is my policy push for this. I don't have a thank you slide, but if you want to get in touch, the 2 websites to reach me on are growsmartri.org or walkpvd.org. And thank you guys again for letting me talk today.
No, thank you. Good presentation, CJ. Hey, CJ, for the clarity of our viewers, the walk button, okay? So tell us what that means to the average person on Empire Street. What does it mean to them trying to cross the street?
Yeah, so it's tricky to answer that, Lloyd, only because, and this is part of the confusing thing, it varies intersection to intersection, literally. So some intersections, that walk button, that walk light that says you can walk across the street and use the crosswalk, it might come on with the green light automatically, which in that case means that the walk button is kind of useless, right? And it doesn't speed up the timing of the walk signal or how long it goes in most intersections. In a lot of intersections, if you hit that walk button, while the direction you're trying to go is green for cars, that walk light won't come on until the next green light, which might mean 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you have no idea. Yeah, so it's very confusing. And so making it automatic basically means you don't have to worry about it. It's going to be, when that light turns green for cars, it's going to say walk for pedestrians. And the city of Providence has made all of the intersections that they own automatic. Rhode has not, they're not under obligation to do that. I know the city's trying to work with them to meet their own kind of standard. But typically that's what that means, is you're not going to get the walk light until you hit that button.
Well, thanks for the clarification. Nice job.
Sure.
Thank you. Last but not least, certainly our very own AAA's Diana Gugliotta. She's a senior manager of public affairs. I had the pleasure of working with her very closely throughout the year. She manages a whole host of programs for safety. She just got her master's degree at Roger Williams University in public administration a few months ago. Congratulations, Diana, on that. And she's in the Leadership Rhode Island class for 2020. I think it's the Pi 2 class, I believe. And she's really invested in groups like Age-Friendly Rhode Island. She chairs the transportation committee for that group. She's a VP of Safe Kids Rhode Island. She's on the board of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So clearly, her traffic safety is, I think, flowing through her veins on a regular basis. So right now, she's working on a whole host of initiatives tied to kids going back to school and the challenges of walking to school, biking to school, etc. So Diana, let me turn it over to you to share what you're working on.
Thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, I wanted to take the opportunity today just to discuss something, very real world, very time sensitive, a challenge that really brings together so much of what all of our panelists were talking about, really the need for equitable transportation infrastructure. So as schools are preparing to reopen, one of the greatest challenges is going to be transportation. And we can go to the first slide if you don't mind. But at AAA, ironically, for years, we have been trying to encourage families to get their students on the school bus to reduce traffic wherever biking or cycling isn't an option. But in respect to COVID-19 and the CDC's guidelines for social distancing, school administrators are really faced with the tough decision on how to prioritize students for busing. So you can see the chart here. These are some plans that were laid out by the state of Massachusetts, but ultimately there'll be more students, transported by personal vehicles. And we're hopeful that in communities where schools are within walking distance, that groups of students will walk to school or older students will have the ability to bike to school. And we're all about supporting them and helping them get the resources they need to make those projects happen. So, one of the things we're also hoping is that more students will learn to use public transportation at this time. And that's especially, applicable to, kids in certain areas that maybe attend private schools or regional schools. RIPTA has done a great job with transit education, but a lot of that was really geared toward older adults. And we're hoping that, younger people and students might take advantage of programs like that. One app that not a lot of people, when we and our team at AAA go out to schools, I'll talk to high school students about the transit app. And that bridges together, all public transit, bike lanes, all of that. And so many kids are like, oh, I've never heard of this app before. So that's something we're trying to encourage as well. But really, now is the time for parents and school administrators and community leaders to come together. And I personally hope that parents will, be part of the process and help to meet the challenge. And a great place to start is with a bikeability or walkability assessment. And you can go to the next slide. I have a little bit about that on the next slide. But really, all it takes is a group of concerned citizens in this world. And that's so true for, just getting parents and neighborhoods together to start this way, to literally walk the route to school with a checklist. And it's also great to bring the kids along because you can get a better understanding from their perspective, like what a short person sees compared to an adult person. They can rate the route by making notes about the condition of the sidewalks, about visibility, the placement of crosswalks. Sometimes there are crosswalks, but they're, up at top of the crest of the hill, completely positioned in the wrong place. Things like signal timing, like CJ talked about. I remember it was really celebrated at my alma mater, which is Emerson College in Boston, when a group of college students even did a walkability assessment and changed the timing of the signals to help, students get through the crosswalk, gave them a little bit more time. So things like that are addressed. You look at the width of the roadways, what traffic control devices might be altered, like CJ talked about, or might be missing altogether. So there is a toolkit that has been published by National Safe Routes to School. It's available online, but we are actually putting all of this information on our AAA community website to just help people to get all this information, kind of get it all in a compendium of a toolkit. So this way, the community can have informed feedback on what the safest routes are. They can decide if biking, like bike trains or walking, is appropriate and feasible, and at what grade level. And if the assessment goes poorly, then I definitely encourage people to write up a report, send it to the civil planner, send it to the DPW, send it a copy to the superintendent of schools, to the mayor, provide public comment at town council meeting. All of those things are really, really important. And then if the assessment goes well, we can actually jump to the next slide. We want to get the word out. So, we want to remind everybody also that AAA has a 100-year-old program called School Safety Patrol. And I'm mentioning that because sometimes the hardest part about things like walking school buses is just finding adult volunteers to give their time. And sometimes that can just be older students that have proper training in pedestrian safety. And our club, thanks to Lloyd, we provide materials to schools across our 5 states at no cost to the school. So we get them trained, we get them up and running. We've done trainings for a long time now, so that's especially handy at times like this. But we go in and we ship out the retroflective materials, the belts and badges, directly to the school. So for those interested in looking into that, you can just go to AAA.com/safety patrol to order materials. And one of the other programs that we strongly endorse is a curriculum called Walk Safe. And we were one of the pilot clubs. This is an evidence-based program that was founded at the Miller School of Medicine at the University of Miami, because they had horrible pedestrian fatality rates for children in that area. And this is just a wonderful curriculum for elementary school students. And it's a great complement to the work that we do at AAA. So you can, pick up this curriculum. It's all electronic, implement it with your classes, and then have us follow up at AAA with programs like, we have Buster the Teaching School Bus. So the bus is a robot, literally goes and talks to the students, and we can do those via Zoom or however else as well. So there's lots of possibilities there. So the website information is there. And, one of the other things I just want to say is don't wait for the schools to start up these programs. I really encourage the parents to, get grassroots and do it themselves. We have this awesome thing called social media, right? So you can get on Facebook, you can create a private Facebook group for the other parents, or an app that I really like. That green logo is for something called Nextdoor, where you can set up a private group just to connect with neighbors and get everybody on board. So we can go to the next slide. I also wanted to give a shout out to Pell Elementary School in Newport. And if my memory isn't too off, that is where I first met Liza and Bari many, many years ago, because they were doing education. I was there to train a group of school safety patrollers. They were there to do bike training. And that's where we first met. But that's an example of a school that's done an incredible job with programs like, biking to school, walking school bus as well. So this is actually a screenshot just from Pell's website from last year. And, it's a couple parents got together and got it rolling. So, that's the time to get the school involved. Get yourself organized, get the school involved to help you promote it. The photographs on the other side of the screen, those are Providence Public School students, and they're another tremendous example of a community that implemented walking school bus and did an awesome job. And it was a compliment to AAA School Safety Patrol, and they got it going at Fogarty, Colonel Young and Woods, Harry Kazarian, Alan Sean Feinstein, and they got Family Service of Rhode Island and the United Way involved. So they were real champion organizations there. In the case of Providence, Family Service had a staff that screened, trained, and scheduled all the volunteers. They actually mapped the routes, and they were able to track the participation in school attendance. And what they found was sick days went down, tardies went down, attendance went up. It was really incredible, and it really checked all the boxes, you know, where they had some real truancy issues in a lot of those schools, and those were reduced considerably. The on-time arrivals were right where they got them to be. The kids got exercise, and it really helped with parent engagement in that school community, or those school communities, I should say.
So Diana,
Yeah.
I'm realizing, as happens every time on these webinars, that we're running up against the clock again. But no, thank you so much for that, because that was a great presentation. Let me just do a quick, if I can ask you to just kind of keep your answers relatively short. We got a few more minutes. Let me start with you, CJ. You are part of Growth Smart, or Smart Growth America, I believe it is. What cities do you see across the country that do the walkability and biking issues better than others? You want to list off 3 or 4 that come to mind that we can maybe emulate here in the Ocean State?
I mean, I would actually open this up also to Liza and Bari. I know Bari has a lot of things to say about Carmel, Indiana, which is, like, as far as bikeability goes, like, outstanding. So I don't know, Bari, if you want to talk about those guys.
Go ahead, Bari.
I'm not sure I would take the little bit of time that we have. There's a number of cities that just do it really well, and it comes from the city council. It comes from the mayor. I mean, that's the big difference. When the mayor and the city council are behind it, and we don't have to step up and make the case, we're there to support it, that's when things happen. We're all way too busy making the case repeatedly.
Let me stay with you, Bari. You are very much involved on biking policy, bicycle policy in the state. Do you feel that the state is going as quickly as it could in meeting the challenges of getting more people on bicycles in a safe manner? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the short answer is no. I mean, we're not elevating biking and walking to the same level of gravitas, or we're not recognizing that people are in harm's way. We're not recognizing that biking is a panacea for health and economy. We're not recognizing the economic benefits of this. We're not recognizing the low cost, high return, and we're not responding to people who want to bike and walk. The people who want the most to bike and walk, it's short distance. We're keeping people in cars for a half a mile or a mile because they're not confident enough to be able to walk or bike between those places. We have to elevate the importance of this kind of planning, and we have to stop all of us on this screen from spending all of our time repeating all of the reasons why, and own it. And if we own it, we will see, you know, Rhode Island become a destination for people who, you know, want to be outside enjoying all of the beauty in all of our cities, all over the state. I mean, we don't even have a marked route for the Ocean Loop in Newport. It is the second most popular destination outdoors after the Cliff Walk. You know, and yet we don't have a mark on the road that says, here's where you can be. We're still struggling with things like, well, not just in Newport, but all over. We're still struggling to find where there's enough room for a bike lane, a car lane, a car lane, a bike lane. When do you see 2 cars and 2 bikes on the road at the same time in the same spot? We don't need to plan that way. We have plenty of room for all of these solutions. They've all been laid out. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can go to the best practice and say, that's similar to what our structure is in this place. Let's build that thing and just get it started. But as long as we have to keep making the point and keep making the case over and over again, and as long as the DOT that, you know, thinks about bikes and walking, but after they take care of the cars, it's going to stay the same. Now is the time when we should be looking at this, because that low cost, high return is a very important point. The sub-quests, like you can do, you know, 25 miles of bike lane, you know, for the same cost as a half a mile of highway. So let's realize what we need to do.
it kind of comes back to the CJ talking about the complete streets, thinking about ahead of time planning. Liza, your initiative in Providence, talk a little bit about the pushback you're getting, if any, and what kind of funding do you need to effect these really thoughtful approaches to bicycle safety?
Yeah, so I think Providence experienced some pushback for one of its urban trails that went in right exactly about 1 year ago in the Elmhurst neighborhood. And that was actually before the Providence Streets Coalition had launched. The city had not done adequate community outreach, and we really launched as a response to that. There's all of these neighborhood organizations getting together and saying, hey, this is why we're here, to prevent another situation like that from happening. And so we immediately, as soon as we launched in December, we started canvassing neighborhoods where projects were going to be happening, and to prevent this shock and outrage, because people want to know what's happening in their neighborhoods and on their streets. People have ownership of the public space, but not only the people that live there, but really everyone who travels down it. So yeah, it's really a matter of going door to door and being really, really vocal within our local neighborhood associations, and getting the word out far before the paint goes down. Nobody should be surprised by what's happening. So that's our main strategy.
Well, Diane, thank you for that. Diane and I have had conversations with Liza about how AAA can help at least educate the public about the initiative. We're going to be doing that as the fall unfolds. But I'm telling you, folks, we're hearing today from people who are not only experts in the field, but also practitioners. They bike to work every day. CJ, you don't own a car, I believe. So we're just lucky to have these folks talking today about this very important issue. Diana's going to be.
Can I make one very, very important point? Sure. Because Rhode is really wonderful through the highway safety program and talking about how to be safer on the roads that we have with the infrastructure we have. DOT is doing an amazing job in that regard and thinking about how to make the situation we have safer. So bravo for that. What we're talking about is making the situation different.
Yeah, and I
would.
Good
at making this situation safer. We need to change the situation.
Yeah, I would concur that Rhode has a totally different mindset than they did 20 years ago, and they're helping to move the needle here on all these issues, as you just said. Diana's going to be reaching out to schools across the state to see how we can help with the safe walking and biking, as well as the rest of you as well, during this really challenging fall semester in public schools and private schools across the state. So, hey, thank you so much, all of you. Now, we may have had questions from the audience that we weren't able to get to yet. We might try something different here in our recorded version of this, is doing here are some questions that were answered and that were asked, and we'll try to answer those to the best of our ability, maybe reaching out to the four of you to get your perspective on them. So, hey guys, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughtful messages about something that's important to the people in the state. And I think you said it well, Bari. AAA members, for example, are members. They drive cars, they ride bikes, they walk daily, they're on a scooter, they're concerned about last mile, they're trying to get to the MBTA station to take the MBTA into the city, or in New York as well. So, this is a very broad issue that affects so many people. So with that, I think we are past the top of the hour. Thank all of you for your expertise, and have a good rest of the day, folks.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thanks, Lloyd.